Hello, Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Health and Wellness. And today we are continuing our series on emotional brain training. Today, Dr. Laurel, my guest again, I want to remind you that she's the creator and the founder of emotional brain training. She is a clinical professor of medicine at UC San Francisco and a health psychologist. And today we're going to be talking about the root causes of our epidemics. Wired for stress. So without further ado, Dr. Laurel, thank you so much for coming back and continuing to build this amazing series with me.
Well, Gina, I love being with you. And since the last time we spoke, I thought more about what your viewers might really want to know. And it's one thing is what is brain-based health? The other is how does it fit into the context of life? And why is it so important right now that we actually use our brain to spiral up from stress to joy and change our entire physiology? So I prepared something for you that I think is a quick run through of some of the most amazing science that's available right now that is actually, as we speak, changing healthcare.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk about it because I really believe that we are having a serious epidemic of stress. People being addicted to it, getting sick because of it. We were talking about that off camera, of course, how stress is affecting our physical bodies, not just our physiology, but our actual health, the decline of a lot of people's health because of stress.
Wonderful. But we're going to turn that around. And this is what you're going to hear about is that the brain can change and it doesn't want a mediocre state. It aches for you to be in joy. It aches for you to be so connected inside that you're connected to the deepest part of you, which is emotional and spiritual and even sexual. What happens is you begin to come alive in a new way, not because you feel present or aware, but because you have the wiring in your brain to take you up and over to a state of what's called neural integration. That means the best it can be. And the emotion that you experience in that state is joy.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing we need to figure out is what about wired for stress? What does it mean? Shouldn't you bring it up to your healthcare professional and say, do you offer brain-based health? You should be offering brain-based health because the best medicine is natural and inside of us. When we move through stress, we don't want to be just sitting around relaxed all the time. The brain wants us to be challenged, to move forward, and then to move up to that state of purpose and well-being. And when we do that, it rewards us with a surge of chemicals that you can't find in a bottle. You can't find in a pill bottle, you can't find in any bottle, a milkshake bottle or an alcohol bottle or any other way, because this is essentially physiology and evolutionary biology and the goodness of life is natural within us when we're in that state of connection and purpose.
Awesome. So why don't we talk a little bit about how we're wired for stress and how we change that with brain health?
Let's do that. Gina, what I want you to know is that when you go to the newspaper, what you see is, oh, there's a depression epidemic, there's anxiety, there's social anxiety, there's too much sugar, too much overeating, too much, there's all these epidemics going on. And it's kind of sad and it's confusing, but in a way there's a beauty just by looking at the brain. And I'm going to show you some amazing information, some key studies that I hope will change how optimistic you are about your health. Because the bottom line is that you own your own brain. With the advances in neuroplasticity and neurophysiology, you can control the motherboard of humanity, which you own, which is your emotional brain, your unconscious mind, with all the circuits that make you who you are, how you respond in life, all the multi-layered feelings that you have. You can become the master of that. You can actually, when you get a response that doesn't feel good to you, you can switch it off. And because you're using emotional tools, thinking doesn't do it. And you can also focus in on the circuit or a wire that's causing you stress and begin to dismantle it so it doesn't get activated as often and doesn't get activated as strongly, or maybe even be transformed. So we have a lot more control over our own health. And if you think about what's happening in the healthcare system, do you really trust the drug companies and all these poor physicians? So many of them do EBT because they are being just strung out, more and more expected of them. more and more demands. They even have to do their own typing now, their own word processing and all. So everyone, the whole system is at a breaking point with so many more people really overwhelmed, stressed out. And the nice part of that is you say, well, to everything that's a loss, there's always a gain. And the gain here is right when we need to really be able to take care of ourselves on a deep level, not just a Band-Aid level, a deep level. Neuroscience is showing up and saying, you know what? Your health, you can control a great deal. You still need medications, procedures, and devices. You need them. But you can create the foundation of your health with your own brain and training your brain out of stress and into joy. And that's what I want to show you today. I want to show you a little bit of the science.
Awesome. I
Are you
love
ready?
the science. Bring it on.
Ready to go? I know. It's its own addiction, I'm sure. Probably is for me. Okay, I want you to know that there's all this wonderful things about how great the United States is. Yes, the United States is great in many ways. But in terms of stress, it's right up there with creating, having people have a lot of stress with Albania, Iran, and Sri Lanka and the United States. Okay, so we are as stressed out as people are in countries that we worry about, that we know they're so disadvantaged. Well, look what's happening to us. We are stressed out. So it's not just somebody that happened to have the worst part of a childhood. Everybody has an imperfect childhood, and some people have a really, really bad childhood, but it's everyone, because the overall stress level is getting under our skin. And so what I want you to know is that when you think about health, you think about all the different diagnoses, all the different medications, essentially physiologic stress. That means stress throughout your body. It's controlled by your brain, but it's throughout your body running around there, is the modifiable root cause of chronic diseases. That means the major killers also of adults, which are cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Emotional health problems, which are skyrocketing, behavioral health problems, susceptibility to infectious diseases, accelerated aging, and premature death. So if that doesn't motivate you to take care of your emotional brain and train it out of stress and into joy, I don't know what will. It certainly scares me. I was mentioning it to my partner, Walt, and he looked at the premature death slide and he says, oh, that really gets me. So notice your emotional responses to that, but also to notice that we are so used to putting labels on problems instead of thinking about problems based on the brain, that we have a huge tracking system around the United States for all these diagnoses. But interestingly enough, they all are related to how stressed an area was. So you can see the influence of stress just by looking at this. The 10 most unhappy states, laziest states, most obese states, diabetes rate, heart disease, Alzheimer's, opioid use, soda per capita, and poverty rate. So I want you to take all these names that we use, these labels, and really what we're talking about is people have brains that are in stress. And the brain in stress means the body's in stress, and it's not so much what goes wrong, but that what stress inside us, not outside, inside us does, is it gives us symptoms of not doing well, gives us extremes, gets us shutdowns. So if we as a society say, okay, we know it's really wrong to drink too much, smoke too much, use drugs, so we're going to legislate around it. We did this over a 20-year period, and we actually got reductions in the specific behaviors that were targeted. But stress doesn't go away that easily. So what happens? So we get an uptick of obesity, per capita consumer debt, and antidepressant use. So if you do this, what happens is you're chasing these these symptoms of stress, and it's exhausting all of us, and it's not making us enjoy. It's getting us, having us limp along and use way too many medications and procedures and devices. What about if you really support someone in changing their behavior, but don't go underneath the behavior to the stress that's driving it? Well, the obesity epidemic was based on that, and it's still happening. So what there's many, many studies, but if you don't treat the stress, you will get results when you get lots of external support. If I have someone I can talk to every day about what I'm eating, I can write it on an app, I can go to my doctor, I can do all of these things and follow these plans. And when I feel really, really supported from outside, my stress level goes down. And then what happens is, as soon as I get really sick of all that and get sick of the diet, I go right back to what I was doing before. And this classic V-shaped relapse is what's one of the factors that's really hurting healthcare expenditure. In other words, we treat the symptom without going to the root cause. And as a result, not only do we either birth another problem or that problem comes back, but there's a loss of spirit. You know, when you put your heart into something, you're trying to make a change in your behavior or your mood or your relationship, and it works when you have a ton of external support, but your brain's still the same, it's going to snap back. And most times people blame themselves, and it's not their fault. It's that the treatments are not going to the root cause of the problem. So here we emerge at brain-based health. Okay, so brain-based health, what is that and how did that come to be? First of all, what it is from a neuroscience standpoint is it's positive emotional plasticity. That means you're changing the emotional wires in your emotional brain of the circuits that cause the toxic stress. So what gets us stuck, overwhelmed, shut down, overloaded, grumpy, whatever. That's what we're doing. I want to tell you the story of this because it's been a big part of my life, and it's also, I think, one of the best stories in medicine. Because right now at the universities and around the country, we're mainly treating the symptoms of stress. Whole systems are built on that. But you know, sometimes there's a rumbling truth in the background. And this is a fabulous story. I'm going to show you 5 different major discoveries in neuroscience that have come together to create this new paradigm of brain-based health. The first one, you see this guy, Peter Sterling. Well, let me tell you the story. I'll tell you quite a long story, so you might want to switch to me. But I want to tell you the story of Peter Sterling. This is a young guy who is kind of a hippie. He was, 1980s. He was a neuroscientist, but he was canvassing some of the poorer areas of Ohio. And here he was really trying to do good. And he couldn't figure out why all these people that had been in a really, really stress-infused area of Ohio were having all these health problems. They had strokes, they had all these problems. He says, what's going on here anyway? So he went back to his lab, and it's really neat to have somebody who cares, and also they have the science skills. So he goes back there and gets a buddy of his to do some studies, and they say there's something not right about physiology. Physiology, which is pretty basic, is wrong in that there is homeostasis. There's this kind of way you kind of cope with things by balancing it out. But when stresses are too high, the brain goes into a different level of functioning. It'll just do anything. It'll go to any extremes. It doesn't care what it should do. It just does anything it has to do to survive. And that's why you get the behaviors that are extreme. Well, what's going on in Washington now, you get the moods that are extreme. You get relationship patterns that just absolutely explode. You think you're a pretty sensible person. You find yourself really, really going on the mat about something. These extremes are a completely different kind of circuit in the brain. When you're at the higher brain states, less stressed, you have these homeostatic circuits. Down here, they're called allostatic circuits, completely careening out of control. He discovered that, 1988, and all the researchers in science said, wow, that's brilliant, but no one knew what to do with it. Okay? What do you do if you say that your whole body is stuck in stress overload? How can you really cope with that? What do you do clinically? Well, Igor Mitrovich, my colleague and EBT scientific director, came along, and he said, well, allostasis, they're just stress reactive circuits. And there's another kind of circuit that's stress resilient. So there's only 2 kinds of circuits in the brain, and you can target those. And so he really changed self-care when he took this whole physiology that's out of whack and said it really comes down to 2 circuits. There are 2 kinds of circuits that you and I have. And if right now you're feeling stress reactive, you're run by a stress reactive circuit, you're going to be numb, way high, way low, miserable, complaining, difficult, judgmental. And you know what? All those things we blame ourselves for, but it's not us. It's the brain happened to activate a stress reactive circuit. We all have them, and they get activated and send us to the refrigerator or send us to bed or whatever they send us to, these circuits cause toxic stress. And these circuits, the dominance of these circuits in the brain, are the underlying cause of our health problems. All the ones I listed under physiologic health, because they control physiology. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. Absolutely.
And it's kind of like a good novel. You know, there's got to be the bad guy and the good guy. Well, there's also this beautiful, beautiful circuit that's homeostatic that just guides us through stress. You know, Gina, recently, have you been in a situation where you knew you had to hold on to yourself? You had to really focus on connecting with your body and your emotions in order to have the strength to do something really difficult. And then you stay present, you stay connected to your emotions. That means your brain's connected. You're running a stress resilient circuit. And afterwards you go, oh my gosh, I did it. I amaze myself. And you feel so proud and you feel so much joy. Just think of a time when you've done that recently. Can you feel the glow in your body? That glow? Okay. So that's evolutionary biology. If we're in a stress reactive circuit, we spiral down, it stays stuck. We judge ourselves, other people, we go to extremes, and then we think we're going to die. We think that it's never going to end. We're always going to feel as miserable as we do right now. And that's really just a wake-up call to us that our evolutionary biology is saying, I'm trying to make you really miserable right now because I'm trying to get your attention. So you'll learn how to shut off this circuit and spiral up to joy again. I'm getting your attention by the pain of it. Not fun, but that's what happens. So once you switch off that circuit and you're in the stress resilience circuit, you really are in your flow. You know, you have grit. You're stronger than you ever imagined. And then afterwards you spiral up to joy. And that joy state says your brain is in perfect harmony with your body. All is well on the planet, and you're going to be rewarded with that glow of a surge. And that's what these circuits do. They bring us to joy. Amazing, right?
It is amazing. And it's very hopeful. It's very hopeful, meaning that, you know, we're not just talking about things that are kind of ideas. This is actual neuroscience, a tool that you can use to shift these powerful emotions in your favor.
Right. When I realized, maybe it was 20 years ago, when I realized that the stress reactive circuit, the allostatic circuit, is a different animal. I mean, it's like this is a dog and this is a cat. You know, when you're in cat mode, you're sweet and you're purring and whatever. And when you're in dog mode and, you know, you're threatened, you're going to bare your teeth and everything. They're completely different kinds of biologic circuits. So it's not us, it's just a circuit, which is a relief to me anyway. So I want to tell you a little bit more. So essentially, once Igor Mitrovich had figured out that there's two kinds of circuits you can actually, you know, target which one's going on, then you can use neuroplasticity to weaken that circuit, because these circuits only change with experience. You can't, you can't dry lab this. You just have to use the tools and they start to really work. You can't sit on the sideline. You have to actually experience your emotions and be stressed and get back to joy. But the father of neuroplasticity is my wonderful colleague, Michael Merzenich, who really was the first one who discovered that the brain could change. And again, these are scientists that give their whole lives to and devotion to science, and their meticulous scientific study, which is really hard to do, and lots of grants aren't funded, have led to this. And that's what happened to Mike Merzenich. He is actually the director of posit science as well for cognitive neuroplasticity, which is a wonderful, wonderful program. And so we could take that, now that we knew the problem, oh, it's not me that I'm depressed, it's not me that I'm overeating, it's not me that I'm so unloving to my spouse, it's a circuit that I can do something about. He showed us that we could do something about these circuits, and then a woman at Mount Sinai and NYU, she worked both places, Daniela, showed that we could actually rewire these circuits. And here I want to show you a little bit about that. The circuits, so the circuit that makes me overeat, or the circuit that makes me grumpy, or the one that makes me procrastinate at work, or gives me a stomach ache because it gets stuck on, these are plastic. And I'm going to show you the study that was so important. There's been many studies on this, but I think this is the most dramatic one. And what they did in this study is they encoded a memory on the subject, a fear memory, so that they would get stress reactive when they would see this picture. Okay.
Okay.
And then they decided to extinguish it. You can extinguish a memory. You can tell the person that isn't scary, show them, condition them in such a way that they no longer respond with fear to the memory. Okay. So that happens all the time. Let's say if you go on a diet and you say, I know what I should eat the broccoli, or I should eat the this or the that, or this kind of oil. You know what to do. You learn these things. And so there's a new learning that goes on. What was important was that they were able to erase the stress reactive circuit, the fear memory. They were able to erase it. But they had a control group, one that was just learned something new when they were stressed, and the other one learned it more like when we're relaxed, like I am right now. I'm connected. I'm running a stress resilience circuit, and I was relaxed. Well, you don't learn when you're relaxed. You learn how to change what stresses you when you're stressed. So the major finding was we only can change these behaviors that drive us to go to extremes and do things we don't want to do and get stressed out if we stay present to our emotions when we're stressed. So in other words, stress is good for us if we have the tools to stay present to those feelings and then spiral up out of them. Isn't that amazing that stress is actually good for you if you can process your emotions?
That's powerful. That is so powerful.
So we've always said, no, you really have to relax, or you have to be mindfully aware and you need to meditate. There's nothing wrong with meditating or being mindful. That's part of EBT. But the issue is, if you don't have the skills to go right down to the stressed out states and stay present to your emotions and process them out, it only takes a couple of minutes, then you're not going to change your circuits. And you're going to be living with those stress reactive circuits potentially for the rest of your life.
That's, what's profound about that is I know there has to be people that think, why do I do those things? Like you almost feel like you're looking at another person with certain behaviors.
Right. Well, we are different people because when we're in the top of the brain and low stress, we can't believe that we would do things like that. And we swear we'll never do them again. And we don't realize that it's not us, it's a circuit. And when we get triggered down there and the reptilian brain is in charge, it's a different world. It's a different world. So I came along, well, I started this a number of years ago, more than 30, but it wasn't neuroscience based until 2007. And then all the pieces sort of fit together at that point. I said, oh, now I know why that worked. That's the science behind this. So essentially the idea is, okay, everybody's got some of these stress resilient circuits, and everybody has some stress reactive circuits. Okay, so we're all equal. We all have some of each. The game in health is to get into stress whenever it comes and actually rewire the stress reactive circuit so you move it into the other basket. Okay, so here's my basket of stress reactive circuits. Oh, I get into this bad mood. Oh, I get into this. Or, oh, I don't tolerate listening to my partner long enough. Or I get so upset and worried about one of my kids that I get a stomach ache. Okay, so we're going to take that out, use the stress, put it in the other basket. And we get more and more resilient circuits, and up goes our set point. And instead of being wired for stress, we begin to be wired for joy. So I'm a practical person. I was raised with, my father was a chemist, and he had type 1 diabetes for 65 years before he died. And I learned from him that it's important to take good care of your health. So I started out as a nutritionist before I was a health psychologist. And so I like to stop my own suffering, and I like to stop the suffering of other people. And I think that anything that you have in your life that's a hurt, when you heal it, it leads to some of the best things in life. And I think my sadness I felt about my dad really got me to want to have practical tools that we could all use to make ourselves feel better faster. So the issue is that I started off doing cognitive behavioral therapy. This is more than 30 years ago. And I thought, well, why isn't this working the way I want it to work? Well, CBT and other awareness programs and health education, it just seems like it would work. And when we're in a low stress state, it does work really well. But the problem is, once we go into stress, the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain that uses these cognitive processes, goes offline. So all of those tools are just vanished. They're just nowhere. And we're just dumped into this bowl of stress that we have to deal with. So a researcher at NYU was just an amazing woman, Candace Rao. She went ahead and did a study. She says, why do we have all these epidemics of these problems that are rooted in stress when we're using CBT? It's supposed to be working. And so she says, okay, it works in the lab. Let's see if it works in real life. And meanwhile, as you know, 20, 30 years ago, the overall general level of stress was not as high as it is now. So it's just, things evolve. So what she did in this study is she encoded a stress memory on these subjects, and then she taught them to use the best cognitive tools there are to decrease their stress. And then what she did, which was fascinating, is she had the folks come the next day, and the next day they either were subjected to a little bit of stress or just left to relax. And they were told to use their cognitive skills to stop the stress that they were experiencing, which, they had a fear memory and they brought it up again. And it turned out that the cognitive tools worked absolutely great when people were in low stress. And it turned out that they completely failed. And you can see here that even 10 minutes and 20 minutes later, the people were still stressed out because the thinking brain had gone offline and the tools were useless, and they were surprised that all of a sudden they seemed to be out of control. So that's what we're seeing, is that to deal with the level of stress we have now, we need to augment our skills. And so at EBT, that's exactly what we've done, is to say, okay, let's just wipe the slate clean. How does the brain naturally process stress? Well, it processes it with emotions, because emotions are much faster than thoughts, and because emotions can be used differently at different levels of stress. So we determined that there were 5 main levels of stress in the brain, and then we just numbered them. I think you've seen this before, but just as a refresher. And so there's 5 different tools. There's 5 different emotional pathways through the brain. And so you have to have all 5, because you actually, remember I told you before that stress is good for you?
Yes.
Okay, it is good for you. You do not want to just relax all the time. Number one, your dopamine would be so low that you'd be depressed, or you just get into addictions in one form or another. You want to be able to charge forward, do hard things, go down to 4 or 5, and then have the tools, the emotional tools, to spiral back up again. And that's how you get an emotional cleanse. You update your brain so that you're in line with what's really going on in the world right now, which is the most important thing, so that you can not have unneeded stress. But what I love about this is, remember that emotional brain is the seat of the soul. And also the emotional brain is the fundamental for evolutionary biology. And so isn't it interesting that all the tools, as we created these tools, and they're mirroring after neurophysiology, but also the connection between a mother and child that ends up in creating a secure connection. These same tools all lead to one state, joy, okay? Neural integration, our best physiology, because it makes perfect sense. Survival of the species is based on decreasing physiologic stress. So why wouldn't the tools bring us right to joy? So that's our goal. When you feel that feeling, you've been stressed and you've moved through it with the EBT tools, and you're back to a state of connection, you're going to feel a glow in your body. There's a surge of dopamine and then this endorphin high. And you say, even if it's slight, it means that there's a surge of helpful chemicals, healing chemicals that go all through your body and brain. And you created that by processing your emotions with symphonic precision. That's what you've done. So again, you got to be mindfully aware. You've got to check in with yourself. But the idea is that's just the start, and you move then to processing those wild and woolly emotions down at 4 or 5, or those lighter emotions up at 1, 2, or 3, and you process them and you come out the other side. It's always a surprise. Every time it happens, still for me, it's really a surprise, to joy. So when you do this over and over again, first casually, and then you decide, oh, I've got a few leftover hurts I want to heal. These are circuits in the brain. I've got a few overreactions or shutdowns I want to heal. Then you use these tools in a more extensive way. You actually take a 30-day program and you learn how to rewire stuck places in your brain. And then you're just off and running and trying to raise your set point for the higher order rewards of life purpose. And once that happens, your brain is in the joy habit. And so the solution to our stress epidemic is continue to use all the medication you need, all the procedures, the tests, do all of that you need. But add to that something very powerful, an emotional floor in your health, in your physiology, and set your sights not on just a mediocre mood or solving one particular stress symptom, but on raising your brain's set point and getting wired for joy. So the idea is learn more about this science. All the articles that I mentioned are on our website at ebt.org. And try out the tools. And when you feel it in your own body, then the science will really make sense.
That is such powerful information. And the one thing I keep saying in our series is that it seems so simple that it almost feels like it can't be right. I think we are also wired to make things harder for ourselves than they need to be.
Right. Well, what happens after childhood, if we don't get these skills sort of by osmosis, just by experience, if our parents don't have these skills, or let's say our parents do have these skills when they're 1 or 2 to transmit to us how to process our emotions, but they were going through difficult relationship, maybe there was a substance problem, maybe it was drinking, maybe it was overwork, maybe there were family problems or health problems, even though the top drawer of their brain and maybe the second drawer has plenty of skills to give to you, circuits to give to you to process your emotions. If they're functioning from the third, fourth, or fifth drawer of their brain, unfortunately, it's not their fault. They're going to download into your emotional brain circuits that cause stress reactivity rather than stress resilience. So, nobody's had a perfect childhood. I certainly didn't have a perfect childhood. And what the problem is, you just start where you are and say, every single stress reactive circuit that I have in my brain is in its own way good, because it's going to knock on my door and tell me that I'm feeling bad. It's going to give me stress symptoms or health problems until I decide it gets my attention. And when I heal that hurt, now you can do this through psychotherapy. You can do these a lot of ways. It's just with EBT, you own the skills. The skills are yours. You can choose which circuits. And it also goes really well with the other methods, whether it's medications or psychotherapy, but you can use these skills morning, noon, and night. And you say, okay, I'm going to unlock this pain and I'm going to rewire this circuit. And you find yourself in such a state of a natural high, a joy that you cannot earn if you had a perfect childhood. You can't earn it because you will have passions. I was just mentioning, my mother had a very, very advanced scoliosis. She was deformed. She was very badly deformed. And she had a lot of shame around that. My father had the diabetes. We all had our problems in our family. But the issue is healing those hurts led to me having passions in my life that I wouldn't have if it just had been peachy keen when I was a kid. So you don't look for those problems, but they're there. Know that around the corner, as you move through those emotions, and they're just emotions, it's just like a job. Imagine in your backyard, you had this huge field of grassy, green, overgrown grass, right? You get your lawnmower out and you go through it and cut down some of the lawn, and pretty soon you have this gorgeous lawn. Well, you just use these tools in this community because there's telegroups and there's forum boards and there's workshops, and it's all about the human voice, hearing the human voice as you use the tools. You wanted that additional support, but as you do this, what you find is that you come alive. And that it's just a job. Everyone has some of these circuits and you don't have to live with them. You can move them from stress to joy. And that's to be a leveling factor. When you know that nobody on this planet can have a better life than you do when you're wired for joy, even if you have health problems, you have disappointments in life. We all have things that just are not going to happen. A lot of my dreams will never come true. But the issue is I have a connection in my brain. And as you get this wired for joy feeling in your body, you know that no one on earth has more than you do. because that's where the joy comes and where the suffering stops.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again for sharing such powerful tools. And I do want to encourage people that are hearing this, head on over to ebt.org and get these tools. I myself am in two different groups. One is intensive, one is weekly. There's something about going through this journey with someone, hearing their voice, like you say, Dr. Laurel, there is like an empathy and there's also a connection. So it helps your emotions as well. There's validation, there's connection, and it helps you get better at what you're going through as well. It's like we're modeling for each other. And when you do that in community, I found that it's really powerful.
That's what the power of the human voice with these tools. But also it's a matter that you don't have to show up and go to somebody's office or anything. It's completely private. So you pick up the phone, nobody knows who you are, no one even sees your face. But the power of the human voice, that's what the emotional brain craves, is that emotional connection. And we're not getting it on social media. What we're getting it on is the EBT groups and other ways where we actually talk about something that matters, and we actually have privacy and confidentiality, and it only takes 5 minutes, and you move from stress to joy. It's a great way to live.
And you can do it any time of day yourself if you're not able to call someone. It's so nice because there's no time limit. So if at 2 a.m. you're having a rough go of it, you have a tool that you can grab if there's no one that you can call to kind of help you spiral back up until you have that opportunity for that human connection.
That's why we have the app, because I would say probably 80% of EBT work is done on the app. And one of the nice things is I thought, well, how can you get something out of an app? And the issue is that when you're at brain state 4 or 5, you actually have an oxytocin surge, and that's the love chemical. So again, stress is good for you when you're really alone and like it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you think, oh gosh, my life is over. What have I done to mess it up now? And you go like that. And what happens is you use the app and you can essentially spiral up because you're connecting to the deepest part of you, your emotional and spiritual core. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. So I want to thank you again, Dr. Laurel, for sharing your 40 years of research and collaboration and education to bring us to a place where there's a tool that we can actually rewire our brains for joy and undo those circuits for stress that we are so comfortable with.
Right. Well, thank you for all your beautiful work. You're doing a lot for the world. I know how much work you put into it, and I'm really grateful.
It's my pleasure. And thank you, everyone. Remember, down below, please subscribe to this channel and click the links to EBT, to Laurel. I'll have her email and her website there so you can reach out to her, get the information you need. You do not have to live in a state of stress and overwhelm. There are tools and resources that actually get in the neurological level to give you the freedom that you need to live the life you were meant to live. So thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.